We will move to our last item, which is privacy protection. Representative Hodgson, Representative Blanton, Representative Grossberg, if you would come to the table and introduce yourselves for the record, and then you can proceed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John Hodgson, State Rep 36. My colleagues, Representative Blanton and Grossberg. We're here to talk about electronic privacy, privacy from electronic surveillance. Sorry, I'll get this a little closer. I may be too tall for the microphone. Privacy from electronic surveillance is a rapidly evolving issue, so much so that it's challenging for legislatures to stay ahead of it. This bill covers 4 types of emerging technology, and we may well add a couple more before the session starts, but we want to start the discussion with the Interim Joint Committee this summer. This bill is a bipartisan team effort. It's widely supported by the public. Nobody really wants the government or their neighbors spying on them, stealing their data, or tracking them. And that's the genesis of this bill. It's been provided to you for your review of the full text of the bill as well as a review of the public. We want to begin digesting the information and providing feedback so we can avoid unintended negative consequences of the language. There's no secret provisions in here, no pride of authorship. We as a group of co-sponsors just want to see the legislation covering these topics enacted to protect our citizens. Most of the bill concepts were gleaned from statutes that are in place in other states and tailored to fit within the KRS. The co-sponsors will now briefly explain the 4 main provisions of the bill. The first one you've seen before. The late Lamin Swan introduced House Bill 438 last year. There was a similar bill in the Senate that limited the retention and sale of license plate reader data. The primary provision was to limit that retention to 90 days with certain law enforcement exceptions, and to limit the selling of that information to private entities. There are a number of private entities who would love to buy license plate location data from us. So that's the first provision of the bill. The text is almost exactly what it was last year when this committee reviewed it. And now we'll move to Representative Blanton for the section on drones.
Thank you, Representative John Blanton, 92nd District. So very basically, this drone privacy legislation is modeled after what Florida has recently enacted. We've began to see an increase in people, you can buy drones now in the toy section, right? And they're flying over people's private properties, and they're taking videos, pictures, and different things. And also, sometimes that includes children out in the swimming pools and different things. And, normally they wouldn't be used for improper purposes, but sometimes they are. And so what this does would make it illegal with the exceptions for certain types of law enforcement use for someone to fly a drone and take images over someone's private property that they couldn't see from standing in a public place. Obviously, if you can stand in a public place and see, that wouldn't apply, but to prevent them from flying these unmanned drones over top of a person's private property to protect their privacy rights. The last thing we want is be out with our kids or grandkids in the backyard in a swimming pool and someone fly over our home with a drone, because right now there's nothing that says they can't, and take imagery and then put it on the internet and use it for improper purposes. So that's what this bill does.
Thank you. I'm Representative Daniel Grossberg from the 30th District in Louisville. If it pleases everyone, I'm actually going to go out of sequence because my speech is written as such, and begin with the AI speech. In April of 2018, a journalist became the target of an online harassment campaign. Much to her horror, sexually explicit videos of her were being posted and shared all across the internet, eventually leading to stress-related health conditions and a withdrawal from public life. The issue here was that she was not really in any of the videos. Instead, her likeness was portrayed using a deep fake. A deep fake is a fabricated video or audio clip made with machine learning to imitate a real person. Since the term was coined in 2017, this emergent technology has advanced rapidly. Anyone with a cheap program can create a deepfake visually indistinguishable from reality with less than a minute of audio and a handful of pictures. Both the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI have released reports with dire warnings of how this new technology may be used. Fraudsters can now mimic reality at a level once thought impossible. Online predators can lure children with realistic young avatars. Deepfake pornography can be used to harass women who post on social media. In fact, according to a deepfake detection agency, Sensity AI, up to 95% of deepfake videos posted online are non-consensual pornography, virtually all targeting women. But deepfakes can also be used to harm business, criminal enterprises, criminal accusations, and have political implications. As the 2024 primaries draw closer, that perception may change, possibly requiring an emergency clause for any relevant legislation. Realistic misinformation campaigns can be produced for dirt cheap against any incumbent at any level. Using only footage on KET live streams and photographs from the legislative website, any representative or senator can be a puppet on strings for bad actors. Even when the fakes can be spotted, their proliferation threatens the validity of all forms of digital communication. If anything you say could be artificially generated, why believe anything? Can a jury of your peers spot the difference between real and deepfake security camera footage? Can scientific data be taken for granted anymore? What about journalism? What about history? The culmination of the information age has created the greatest tool of deception. So far, 2 other states, California and Virginia, have made the abuse of this technology a crime. Kentucky should be the next to join them in protecting not just the privacy and dignity of our citizens, but the truth and democracy as well. And finally, as for microchipping, the relationship between man and machine has gotten closer and closer as we march further into the century. Today, we are content to carry supercomputers in our pockets. Many of us on our wrists track our location, our vitals, and our habits. Tomorrow, it might be augmented or even virtual reality overtop our eyes. But some have already taken the next step with injected microchips. Implants no larger than a grain of rice are inserted in the hand, containing user data or allowing users to unlock doors and use certain equipment. Still in its infancy, this technology could expand to uses previously thought impossible. Like any new technology, could also be used for the unthinkable. Trials in Sweden have been around 3,000 individuals voluntarily chipping themselves so they could use their hands in virtual wallets, similar to Apple Pay. Across the world, smaller tech companies have a trial running similar programs with limited success. But one can imagine the widespread push for these implants once the value of the data collected by them outweighs the cost of implementation. Many employers today require phone applications to manage schedules and time cards. Implanted microchips could merely mainstream the process. The fact that microchipping has yet to gain traction gives our legislature a unique opportunity. Unlike artificial intelligence, representatives and senators can take the time to fully understand the technology and place in their communities before the issue spreads like wildfire. First and foremost, with an advancement that has been so invasive to the body itself, we must take this opportunity to protect those that do not want microchips inserted in them for identification purposes. These concerns are not only understandable, but essential to maintaining the independence of the individual. 11 other states across the country have seized this moment, protecting everyday men and women from potentially being coerced or even required to inject themselves with chips. As a state that has maintained a frontier spirit for 231 years, we should be swift in the adoption of legislation to prevent corporate mandates of invasive procedures before it's too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Bradsher.
Well, I really like this bill, but it's got several legs, right? Several components.
Yes, four components.
And that would be AI.
Yeah, the deep fakes, drones, license plate reader data, and microchips. are The
And
four legs.
so the license plate portion, I don't know about that one. So can you explain what's going on with that?
Okay, so there are flock cameras all over the place in Kentucky that are capturing license plate data, and it's very useful for law enforcement if they have a carjacking, car theft, fleeing suspects to find out where those people are. But there are lots of people who would like to have that license plate data, private users. Right now, I don't believe that there's a law that prevents the government entities that own those flock cameras from selling that license plate reader, let's say to a car repo company, but marketing people as well. And that data on your license plate is essentially giving away your position, so it limits the retention of that to 90 days unless it's being used for some lengthier law enforcement purpose. Just, endless data about where you are and what you're doing being kept forever is generally not a good idea.
Well, that sounds reasonable, and I'm glad it's a bipartisan. I hope it is a bipartisan. It could fly through this area. I'm sure there's some changes coming, but I like it, so thank you.
Thank you, Representative. I guess to Representative Grossberg, the part of the bill that you were discussing, the bill would prevent corporate mandated microchipping. Does it also contemplate restrictions on any government mandates that might be put out there at all?
It does not, Mr. Chairman, precisely because I have the expectation that at some point the United States military is going to mandate it for all of our enlisted and commissioned personnel, and I don't think that we have the authority to refuse it here. Others may disagree with me, but I think that will be disputed and litigated at the federal level. But if you wanted to include a provision that Kentucky state employees could not be mandated, I would be amenable, and I presume my colleagues would be amenable to that as well, but I respectfully don't think we have the authority to tell the federal government that they can't do it.
Sure. Do you have any other comments or discussion this morning? Looks like we don't. Do you, any closing comments?
Just
from
a
the
closing
presenters?
thought. We are looking at a couple of other things. I've recently been to some legislative conferences talking about AI. Frankly, we're not quite sure what to do about it, but it's something of an emerging threat in general with work products. And also, everybody's familiar with the trackers you can put on a vehicle. Well, they now have trackers that you can drop into somebody's coat pocket and monitor their location. So we're looking at possibly adding something along those lines. We passed a bill last year to say you can't track somebody's vehicle, so this would just be adding a clause saying, you can't put a tracker on their person either. And that technology is also getting as small as a grain of rice. It's kind of scary.